Welcome to today's conversation. I'm your host, Deidre Sirianni, and today I really want to talk about being an embodied leader and what it really takes to lead, what it really takes to show up and do the hard things, and what it really takes to build a business and a life that you love. So let's talk about some of the qualities of what it looks like to be a leader. First things first, leaders go first. And what I mean by that is leaders take the leap of faith before everything makes sense. Leaders are the ones who will stick out their neck and say the thing that needs to be said. Leaders are the ones who will take a risk. Leaders are the ones who will do the hard thing regardless of whether or not they feel like doing it. Leadership is about showing up and really showing people what's possible. And I think for a long time in my life, I thought of leadership in a different way than it actually is. I thought that leaders needed to tell everyone what to do, whereas really an embodied leader is someone who does what they need to do and inspires others to do the same. And leadership has nothing to do with how many followers you have, but more about how many leaders you create along the way. So I was hosting one of my programs the other day on our live calls inside of Speak to Scale. It is a program specifically for those who want to bring their message to stage and podcast and really bring their gifts to the world in a bigger way and grow their business. And one of the attendees was like, "Hey, I'm in my car. I don't have my notes with me today, but I'm here." And she joked, she's like, "I'm a bit of a hot mess." And I really wanted to talk about that today because I think this is so important when it comes to leadership. And if you are someone who wants to show up more powerfully in your life and really be the leader that you feel called to be or know that you're here to be, but maybe you're not really showing up for it, I want to give you some signs that you are stepping into leadership and how you can show up more powerfully. So she's like, "Hey, I'm here. I'm in my car. I don't have my notes today." And it was a practice session where inside of Speak to Impact, we practice our stories, we practice our talks so that when we go on stages, on podcasts, and we're out there, we're really polished, we're really put together, we're really showing up for the listeners and the audience and making a big impact. And so she's like, "Yeah, I'm not prepared today, but I'm here." And I really wanted to acknowledge her. I'm like, "Listen, you have so many reasons not to show up today. You're not fully prepared. You feel, as you mentioned, like a hot mess, but you showed up anyways." And this is really the difference between those who have an idea or a vision or a goal to go out and create a movement, a company, make a bigger impact in the world, or get really good at a skill, and those who don't. A lot of the time, we think that if we are going to lead or if we're going to show up in some sort of container, we need to be our best. We need to show up and we need to be perfect. Otherwise, we're not going to show up. That is more of like a perfection trap that a lot of us can get in. And as a result, can actually sabotage our success and sabotage our growth and can cause us to not actually show up, not actually be the leader of our life, and not actually get the desired outcome or result that we truly desire. So being the leader of your life, being a leader is also showing up when shit's hitting the fan, when things aren't pretty, when things aren't perfect, when you're not fully prepared and you wish things were better, but you show up anyways. And of course, a big part of leadership is also doing your part in every way you can to show up and be your best, but also not disqualifying yourself when you're not and showing up anyways. Now, I remember years ago. This is probably like probably like 6 years ago. I was going through a pretty big change in my life. I went through a really big breakup and I was in this accelerated evolution master coach training. And it was a very intense year-long program. And essentially, this program is about eliminating everything that is not the truest essence of who you are and stepping into the leader that you're meant to be and becoming a master coach. So, like with any container that requires you to become the best version of yourself, become a leader, and also step into your authentic self, it's going to illuminate all of the things that are not that. And so on that journey during that year, I remember I was driving out to my mentor's place and he was hosting a retreat. So it was like a 3 to 5 day retreat. And I remember driving about an hour to his place and I just could not stop crying. I couldn't stop crying. And the past version of me, maybe a year prior to that, absolutely would not show up to a mentor's place around people or around peers unless I had a smile on my face, unless I was playing the part of everything's great, being in all of the good emotions and, not allowing anything else to be present, because that was a big programming that I had before really doing this deeper spiritual work, really doing this deeper healing work, and also stepping into more these roles of leadership and authenticity. So I'm driving out to my mentor's place and I can't stop crying. I'm literally, I think I'm in shock a little bit from the breakup that I just went through. And I like try to kind of bring it together before I walk into their house. And we're probably, I don't even think we're halfway through the year. So it's a year-long program. We're not even halfway through the year. And I'm walking into a house with about 15 other people that I know through this program. And I try to like wipe my tears and act normal. And I walk into their house and I just don't stop crying. I can't stop crying. And I remember it was almost a blur of a weekend because that first day, all I did was cry. And there weren't even words for me to fully express why I was crying. But a lot happened that weekend. And the first thing that when I look back on it now, that really had to do with leadership as far as leading my own life, being the leader of my life, but also being in that space of vulnerability, but showing up anyways, was I gave myself permission to be as I am or as I was in that state and still show up for the training, still show up in the group, still participate. Whereas it would be so easy for me not to show up. And so the weekend was a blur, total blur, a lot of emotions, lots going on for me, a lot of shock from what I was going through. And what I really loved about the group, and also one of the key things that we were taught, and also that, I teach anyone who's holding space, is to not try to fix people, to not try to change their state, and to try not to coddle anyone who's going through something, because that actually can interrupt their process and block them from actually feeling and being however they need to be. So that was a big reflection for me as I showed up, regardless of how I felt. And I was basically a mess, a big hot mess express. And then I remember, I think it was the last day of the retreat, we had to stand up and talk about what our creed was, what it was that we stood for, that we wanted in the world, and all of that. We had to basically have a manifesto that we were going to share with the group. And I wrote some things down, and it was interesting because all weekend I was in this authentic, not feeling great mode, but showing up anyways, leading. And then as soon as it was my turn to stand up and share, I was like, okay, now I need to be the bubbly, outgoing version of myself, right? And it switched, and I got up and I said my spiel, my mantra or my manifesto. And I was putting on a show. I was putting on a show because I thought I needed to be that way in order to be accepted, because now I'm in front of people and now I'm talking, right? And I remember finishing what I was sharing and my mentor looking at me and saying, that was the fakest thing I've ever seen. And I think there was only one or two or three of us that spoke for that piece. And I remember sitting down and being like so offended. I was so offended by my mentor saying that. It was so vulnerable for me to even show up to that retreat because I was going through so much shit at the time. But now as I look back on it, 5, 6 years later, a lot of evolution, a lot of change, I can see that he was in his leadership by calling me out on how I shape shifted into a version that was excited, that was outgoing, that was selling what I was saying from in front of the group, because that was a pattern that I had my entire life of, oh, when I'm in front of people, I have to perform, I have to be this in order to be loved. And I think a big part of leadership is also understanding that, yes, it's important to bring your best self to spaces and places, but also be authentic and be real. So there was that duality and that experience of showing up, having these emotions, going through something big, and then me shape shifting in front of the group and being called out by my mentor. And I remember I was pretty pissed at him for the rest of the day. I felt like I was in a really vulnerable space and that wasn't cool. But years later, I'm like, oh yeah, I was being really fake in that moment. And that was a coping mechanism that I had, that if I am not the happiest person, or if I'm not bringing my best energy into a space, specifically when I was on in front of everyone sharing, then it's not okay. And that was a really that was a wake up call for me in a lot of ways of like, oh, where am I showing up and performing? And whenever we're performing from a place of I have to be this in order to fill in the blank, we're not really leading from a place of embodied leadership. We can be leading from a place of being performative. So I wanted to share those stories with you today because leadership, embodied leadership is less about what you look like, what you sound like, how many followers you have, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, how perfect you are. But it's more about how authentic you are, how fully you show up when you are given a moment or an experience where maybe you want to opt out, you want to play small, you might not want to show up to the workshop, you might not want to show up into the room, you might want to put on a show. But instead, you show up anyways, messy. You show up imperfect and you lead by example. Because I think in the world that we live in, it is so easy for us to get distracted and to see what everyone else is doing, like, oh, their life is perfect, or they're showing up perfectly on social media, or oh, that person has it together all the time. And that's great. And, I think it is really powerful to really work towards excellence in all areas of our life, but only if we bring that authenticity. And only when we can still give ourselves permission and grace to be messy, to not have everything figured out and show up anyways, because that is really what embodied leadership is. It's about doing the hard thing. It's about doing the right thing. It's about showing up when we don't feel like it. It's about being authentically ourselves without putting on a show. And in that space, we give everyone else permission to do the same. So I would love to hear from you how this episode has landed, how it's feeling in your body, and how you are showing up in your business, in your life, and in your relationships. And if you are fully leading, or if you find yourself opting out and hiding and stepping away from not being perfect, from, showing up and it not being necessarily the way you wanted to show up. And that is a part of the process of growth of our evolution and is a necessary initiation into our greatness. So I hope today's episode has resonated on embodied leadership. It's about showing up. It's about bringing our authenticity and being okay with being messy. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you have, please go ahead and share it with someone who needs to hear this. And if you haven't already, please leave a review. Big love.